This video is brought to you by my Twitch account. Okay, so this isn't really a sponsorship video, even though I wish it was, but this video seriously wouldn't be possible without my Twitch account. On my Twitch account, I stream various video games, and if you guys want to watch me stream video games, then check out my Twitch account right here. See? It's right there. And now, on to the video. Well, if you can't use cute and innocent little animals to turn them into robots, then use beans instead. Caution! The following video is an in-depth review of the video game that I'm currently reviewing, which means that there will be massive spoilers in this review. If you haven't played this video game yet, then please feel free to play this video game first before watching this video. However, if you have already played this video game, or you just want to know my thoughts on this video game, then keep watching. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine was probably the most unique Sonic the Hedgehog game that I ever played. It was released in 1993, and it was an unusual spin-off to the Sonic the Hedgehog video game series. Because one, it was one of the few Sonic the Hedgehog video games at the time that was based off an animated series, which was Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. And two, rather than be the standard platforming game that the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise is well known for, it was actually an American mock-up of the Japanese classic puzzle game Puyo Puyo, specifically the 1992 arcade version. Now, you were probably wondering to yourself, but Rabbitearsblog, why didn't you review the first Sonic the Hedgehog video game first? I mean, shouldn't you review the first Sonic the Hedgehog video game so that way we will have a better understanding of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise at large? Well, that was my plan in the beginning. I wanted to review the very first Sonic the Hedgehog video game so that way for anyone who is not familiar with the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, they would have a better understanding of the franchise once I review the very first game released in the franchise. But unfortunately, Steam didn't have a copy of the game in its original format, and I lost my Sega Genesis, and no, I'm not going to review Sonic Origins anytime soon, since I'm still in the early phases of reviewing as many Sonic the Hedgehog video games as I can. So for now, my review for the very first Sonic the Hedgehog video game would have to be on the waiting list at the moment. But before I get into what I liked and hated about this game, I would like to give out a brief summary of this game. The game starts off with Dr. Robotnik kidnapping the citizens of Beanville and turning them into his robotic slaves by throwing them into his Mean Bean steaming machine. The reason why he's doing this is because he doesn't want any fun or music on Mobius, which the citizens of Beanville seem to be guilty of. It's up to you, the player, to come in and help save the beans from their robotic fate by defeating Dr. Robotnik and his 12 mechanical mooks in these bean puzzle games. Now, I mentioned before that Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine was a very unique game in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and that was one of the things that I liked about this game. I used to play this game all the time when I was a kid, and what I loved so much about this game was the unique premise of the game. At the time, this was one of the few Sonic the Hedgehog games that didn't feature Sonic himself. Oh no! The actual main character in this game is none other than Dr. Robotnik himself, Sonic the Hedgehog's main arch-nemesis in the franchise. I love the fact that we actually had a Sonic the Hedgehog game where Dr. Robotnik was the main focus, and even though we don't really play as him, we actually play against him. It was nice seeing everything from his perspective. Sure, there's not much to the story of this game since it's basically about Dr. Robotnik up to his usual hijinks of trying to take over the world, and in this case, trying to turn innocent people to robots, but I do like the fact that we get to see how Dr. Robotnik enacts his evil plans, and we get to see him sending his minions to take care of the job for him. Also, we do get some fun dialogue from the characters themselves, especially all of the badniks that you have to fight against, as they have some of the most hilarious dialogues that I have ever seen in any video game. Another interesting thing about this game is that you, the player, is the one who takes down Dr. Robotnik, not Sonic the Hedgehog himself. I rarely see a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog games where you play as yourself, and this was one of the earliest Sonic the Hedgehog games where you play as yourself instead of Sonic the Hedgehog, and it made this game so unique to me. It felt like I had a more personal interaction with the characters in this game than I ever did with any previous Sonic the Hedgehog game released before this game. Another thing that I liked about this game was that it was based off the TV series Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, well, let me give you a brief rundown of the series. Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog is well known as the very first animated adaptation for the Sonic the Hedgehog video game series, and it was also well known for a couple of YouTube poop videos. But anyway, this series is about Sonic and Tails trying to foil Dr. Robotnik's plans to take over the world, while dealing with Dr. Robotnik's minions, Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts at the same time. This is often regarded as the most humorous version of Sonic the Hedgehog to date, well before the Sonic Boom TV series came out decades later. So, Dr. Robotnik's Me Bean Machine came out around the same time as the TV series Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, and it took some cues from the TV series. For one thing, the design of Dr. Robotnik himself is based off of his design from the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog TV series, and not from his design from the games at the time. It was interesting seeing the cartoonist design of Dr. Robotnik from the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog TV series make its way to the games, and I love the 16-bit sprite look of Adventures Dr. Robotnik in this game. Speaking of the Dr. Robotnik in this game being based off of the Dr. Robotnik and Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, we are also introduced to Dr. Robotnik's robotic minions, including Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts themselves. Most of the robot lackeys that you fight against in this game came from the pilot episode of Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog called Super Special Sonic Search and Smash Squad. Whew, that was a mouthful. And even though most of these robots, with the exceptions of Scratch, Grounder, and Coconuts, only showed up in the pilot episode, it was great seeing them appear in this game and getting to fight against them. I also love the little animations that were being done whenever you either beat Robotnik and his lackeys, or when you lose to them. I really love the creepy smirk that Scratch would give you if you lose to him, as his grin makes him look like he wants to kill you in your sleep. And of course, I love both the animations of Dr. Robotnik himself of either losing or winning, as both facial expressions were some of the most expressive I've ever seen in this game. Now, before I played this game, I had never played a Puyo Puyo game before, and I was unfamiliar with the Puyo Puyo franchise at the time. Heck, I didn't even know that Dr. Robotnik's Me Bean Machine was basically a mock-up of the classic Puyo Puyo games until years later. So, Dr. Robotnik's Me Bean Machine was my introduction to the gameplay style of the Puyo Puyo franchise, and ever since I became somewhat of a fan of this game, it caused me to want to play the Puyo Puyo games and see how they compare to this game. And I have to say that I had as much fun with the later Puyo Puyo games as I did with this game. And now let's talk about the gameplay, because this wouldn't be a video game review unless I talk about the gameplay. Now, the gameplay in this game is very unique from all the other Sonic the Hedgehog video games, as this is a puzzle game instead of a platforming game. When we think of the gameplay for Sonic the Hedgehog, the main goal of the gameplay is to run across the stages as fast as you can, so that way you can get to the end of the stages before time runs out. You also spend time trying to collect rings throughout each stage, as collecting 100 rings gives you an extra life, or in some cases, collecting 50 rings or more will allow you access to the special stages. And you also have to defeat most of Dr. Robotnik's badniks that litter throughout each stage. But with Dr. Robotnik's Me Bean Machine, you are placed inside a Stonewall Arena, which is reminiscent of the Stonewall Arena from the 1992 Puyo Puyo arcade game. And the goal here is to make sure that your arena doesn't get filled up with the beans that drop down from above the arena. Because if your arena gets filled up with beans, then you automatically lose the game, while your opponent, whose arena didn't fill up, wins the game. So, how do you prevent your arena from filling up with beans? Simple. You have to make at least 3 or more chains of the beans of the same color scheme, which would cause the beans to disappear from the arena, and the beans would usually drop from above in a set of 2. Like for example, say that 2 yellow beans drop from above the arena in a set of 2. If the next set of beans contains a yellow bean, then you match that yellow bean with the previous set of yellow beans, and those yellow beans will automatically disappear if you have 3 or more yellow beans connected to each other. You can also defeat your opponents by getting major bean combos all at once, which would cause some gray beans, which are called garbage beans, to rain down your opponent's arena, and would cause your opponent to have trouble trying to make multiple chains of beans because the garbage beans are in the way of making the perfect chain combo. I do love this gameplay style because I am a huge fan of puzzle games, and trying to match the beans with the same color schemes while trying to find ways to make your opponents lose by doing huge combos was such a fun experience for me. Now, why I did enjoy this game, I had a couple of issues with this game. The first issue that I had with this game was the difficulty spike in the later stages. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for a good challenge in a video game, but in the case of this game, when the difficulty at the later stages started to rise, I found myself getting more frustrated with trying to beat this game. This game becomes more difficult to beat when the beans start falling from above in a very fast pace, and it makes it really hard to set up some good chain combos that will help you defeat your opponents. Also, your opponents are somehow able to create multiple chain combos without breaking a sweat, which often causes large amounts of garbage beans to rain down your arena. And you are left wondering to yourself about how your opponents are able to create multiple chain combos on command while you are struggling and trying to create the perfect chain combo to take out your opponent. Sometimes I got frustrated whenever my opponents are able to pull off perfect chain combos and beat me in a few seconds, despite the fact that I've spent most of the game actually trying to strategize on how to create multiple chain combos at one time. Another issue with this game is that it's not your traditional Sonic the Hedgehog game. Now don't get me wrong, I do like this game, but I will admit that when I first picked up this game, I was a bit thrown off by how different this game was compared to the other Sonic the Hedgehog games that I've played before. For one thing, Sonic the Hedgehog himself doesn't show up in this game, and at first it was a bit strange to me that we have a Sonic the Hedgehog game that didn't feature Sonic. Another thing about this game was that it's not a platforming game like most Sonic the Hedgehog games are, but rather a puzzle game, which was rarely seen in the franchise at the time. It did make this game seem like the oddball of the series because it had elements that were way different from what you expect from your usual Sonic the Hedgehog game. And I can imagine that anyone who wants to play this game might be a bit put off by how different this game is from the other Sonic the Hedgehog games, especially if you aren't a fan of the Puyo Puyo franchise. Overall, I give Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine a score of an 8.9 out of 10. Even though the difficulty spike in the later stages were a bit frustrating to get through, and this is not your standard Sonic the Hedgehog game, I really love how unique this game was from the other Sonic the Hedgehog games. The gameplay style of this game alone made me want to play the later Puyo Puyo games, and I had a lot of fun trying to make chain combos with the beans while trying to beat my opponents. At the end of the day, even if this wasn't your standard Sonic the Hedgehog game, I really appreciated that this game did something very different with the franchise by introducing a new gameplay style that was actually enjoyable to play through. And I would definitely try to replay this game as many times as I can. Hope you enjoyed my review on Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Hey guys, like this video? If you want to check out more crazy content from this channel, then please hit that big old colorful subscribe button. And if you are feeling extra generous, then please support me through Patreon so I can make more awesome content for this channel.